My mother-in-law secretly ruined my wedding dress, but I caught her on camera and exposed her sabotage at our wedding, leaving everyone speechless in shock. I, a 35-year-old female, got engaged to my boyfriend, a 26-year-old male, of 3 years about 6 months back. We have been living together for 2 years, and it just felt like the time was right, so I said yes. My fiancé is the sole heir to his father's company. They are the owners of a really reputable shipping company and are loaded, which I did not even find out about until after I had been seeing my fiancé for 1 month already. I am mentioning this so that you guys know I was never in this for the money at all, and I am certainly not a gold digger. As a matter of fact, I myself make a decent living as a flight attendant. I met my fiancé at a gig where he asked me out as soon as I served him coffee. Even though I was hesitant to say yes because he looks significantly younger than me, I ended up agreeing to a date because of his insistence, and I have never regretted it either. We pretty much have a fairy tale romance, but the only thing that has been in our way ever since the first year of our relationship has been my mother-in-law. Now, you guys may have heard of mothers-in-law who dislike their daughters-in-law, but that is not the case here. No, it is much worse, because unlike others, my mother-in-law absolutely loathes me. She cannot stand the sight of me, and has made it abundantly clear right from the first time that my fiancé brought me home to meet his family. 4 months into our relationship, she pulled me aside after dinner and told me to break up with him, or she would make my life no less than a nightmare. I was obviously shocked that she had spoken to me this way since she had been really sweet to me throughout dinner. But obviously, that was just an act for my fiancé. She called me a glorified maid and said that she was not going to let some gold digger flight attendant steal her son away from her when he could do so much better. Not only that, she also hated the fact that I was older than him and told me to go find someone my age instead. I felt humiliated and had half a mind to tell my fiancé about what had happened, but decided against it because I wanted to show my mother-in-law that I was not the weak and flimsy woman she had expected me to be, and I was not intimidated in the slightest. Throughout the years, she has done her best to make me feel uncomfortable and put me down whenever she finds the chance at family events and holidays. But I have never let it get to me, and here we are, finally getting married. I really thought that she would accept defeat this time and let things go gracefully, but I was wrong. As soon as she was told the news of our engagement, she tried to convince my fiancé to force me to quit my job. She told him that as an air hostess, I would never have enough time to spend at home with him and that would create problems in our marriage. I guess she had expected me to say no to that, and that would inevitably lead to a fight between me and my fiancé. But little did she know, I had already applied to switch to a desk job a couple of weeks before the engagement. I had already been planning on making the switch regardless of marriage, so that was not going to be an issue at all. And of course, that was a huge disappointment to her, since we did not have a massive fight like she had wanted us to. So next, she started trying to take over control of the wedding, and decided to call all my ideas tacky and said that I had bad taste, even though nobody else thought so. Luckily, even that was nipped in the bud by my fiancé, who told us straight away that the only thing she had any saying in was the guests we invited, since they had a lot of family friends to invite and only his mother could keep track of it. Otherwise, whatever I said would be the last word, and if she had any opinions on it, then she could simply keep it to herself. That rubbed her the wrong way as well, but after that, she started staying away from me and kept to herself most of the time. I could tell she was not happy about it, but now that my fiancé had made it clear that he would not tolerate any disrespect towards me, there was not much that she could do anyway. So anyway, 1 week before my wedding, I brought home my wedding dress to try on the next day. My friend had her own label, so needless to say she was my designer, and I was extremely pleased with the results. It had been months and months of fittings and alterations, and I could not believe that I finally got to try it on. It was the weekend, and my husband was not home that day either since he had work, so I decided to try it on and take a video of me twirling in my dress, just so that I could send it to my bridesmaids. My mother-in-law had been sitting in the living room since the morning that day because she had come over to meet my fiancé and talk to him about the guest list, so she'd refused to leave and said that she would wait for him to come back home. The only time I came out of my room was to bring my dress into my bedroom since I had kept it in my husband's study earlier, but I did not trust my mother-in-law to leave it be, and that was my first mistake. I did notice her eye the bag, and I guess she could tell by the shape of what was in it. I did not care much about it though, and just let her sit out there while I went back to my bedroom to try it on. But before I got into the dress, it was up to me to take a long shower and get all nice and clean before I actually tried my dress on. We have an attached bathroom, so I must have been in the shower for around 30 minutes before I came back out. While I was in there, I did hear some sounds outside, but did not think much of it. I regretted it as soon as I came out and saw that my dress had been taken out of its cover and snipped in odd but noticeable places, and there were multiple red stains over it. I must not have locked the door to my bedroom properly because I was in a hurry, and my mother-in-law had found it easy to force it open. I obviously knew that this had my mother-in-law written all over it, and I rushed out to confront her because I really was at my limit, but she had already left by then. She had even left an open bottle of red wine and a pair of scissors on the coffee table, probably to taunt me. I knew she had done this to ruin my day and force me to wear something off the rack at the very last minute, because obviously she had messed my dress up pretty badly and was trying to push me into a corner by ruining all that I had planned for myself. This was her last attempt at ruining my wedding, since she could not ruin my relationship with her son. I think I must have sat and cried on the couch for 10 minutes before I remembered that I had left my phone in the bedroom. I ran back to my room, and to my immense relief, I had been careless enough to leave it on the dresser while it was still recording. For the first time in my life, I was thankful that I had forgotten about my phone and left it recording, because it had captured every single thing that my mother-in-law had done, and I now had video proof of her trying to sabotage my wedding. Now, I could have used it then and there and sent it to my fiancée to get her uninvited from the wedding and probably have her cut off from us for the rest of our lives, but I decided to go a step further and get back at her for everything that she had put me through all these years. I had put up with enough, without a word, simply because I was determined to stay with my fiancée. It was not even a war against her, at least on my end. I just did not want to stir up drama, and I knew that she would go out of her way to be cruel just to incite a reaction from me. So, I stayed quiet even in the face of insane cruelty and disrespect for the sake of my own peace and my relationship. But I had had enough. I had thought that responding negatively to her behavior would mean that she would win, but this time she truly outdid herself. If a reaction was what she wanted, then that was exactly what I was going to give her. I was very careful to save the video and even saved it to my laptop just in case. I dried my tears and sent my dress back to my friend, requesting her to fix all the things that my mother-in-law had done to it. She was the only person apart from me who was aware of the situation, and I cannot put into words how thankful I am for her kindness and support. She told me she would get it done before my wedding day, and I did not need to worry about a thing, which was just so sweet. The next few days after that, my mother-in-law visited regularly under the pretense of speaking to my fiancé, and I was as nice to her as I could be. Even she seemed to be taken aback by my behavior, since she had obviously expected me to be majorly pissed off about what she had done. But I merely pretended that nothing had happened at all, and that did a pretty good job of misleading her into believing that I had looked past the incident with the wedding dress. So she started getting even more smug, and would make remarks about how she could not wait for the day of my wedding to see me all in white. She had no idea what I had up my sleeve, so I kept my mouth shut and only smiled whenever she passed these comments. I told my friend to bring the dress with her only on the morning of my wedding, because I did not want to risk any more such incidents. 3 days before my wedding, my friend showed me on a video call how she had cleaned up all the stains and she had sewn it all back together, so it looked as good as new. I guess my mother-in-law had underestimated how amazing my friends were and how she would be willing to put all her work aside just for my sake. So, 2 days back, on the day of my wedding, when I walked down the aisle wearing the very dress that my mother-in-law had supposedly ruined, she was pretty much dumbstruck, to say the least. I did manage to get a glimpse of her expression when she saw me wearing my dress, and it was one that clearly said, "Oh crap." So, I was really pleased with that. I managed to put everything related to my mother-in-law out of my head for the next few minutes while the vows were exchanged, and it was all just like how I had imagined it. I was incredibly happy that despite her many attempts, she had failed yet again to do anything that would ruin my day. I had the ceremony that I had always dreamt of, and I was genuinely thrilled. After the ceremony, it was time for the wedding speeches, and I decided to save the best for last. So, everyone went up and said beautiful things about me and my husband, and I was truly moved by it all. But I also kept my head clear, because I knew what I was about to do was going to shock people, to say the least. Finally, at the very end, I took out the microphone from my maid of honor and started off by thanking everyone for attending. There were around 200 people in attendance, most of whom were my husband's guests. His parents, friends, and their families were all there, and so were most of his family. So there really was no better opportunity for me to reveal to them what kind of person my mother-in-law was. I said a couple of sweet things about my relationship with my fiancé, and kept it appropriately cute. But then, After I had done all of that, I said that I also had something really important that I needed people to know. I told them about how there was only one major obstacle that stood in my way throughout the course of our relationship, and that obstacle was present at the wedding as well. That led to a lot of confused looks and whispering, and that was quite natural. My husband's family and friends also looked quite shocked because they had no idea what was coming. I said that they could see for themselves what obstacle I was referring to, and on cue, the clip of my mother-in-law ruining my wedding dress began to play. Initially, nobody seemed to understand what was happening. But then, as my mother-in-law entered the frame, a flicker of understanding appeared on people's faces, and there were quite a few audible gasps from the guests, while they watched my mother-in-law viciously tear away at the fabric, and then splash red wine on several spots on purpose. She then left hurriedly, and then that is where the clip cut off. That was followed by probably the loudest silence I had ever heard in my entire life, until 2 minutes later, my mother-in-law got up all red in the face. She then proceeded to charge at me like an angry bull, but luckily, my husband caught her before she could come close to me and dragged her away while she screamed all sorts of profanity at me and accused me of trying to ruin her reputation in front of her family and friends. I was pleased with her reaction, and even more pleased when I realized that the people present looked scandalized, since it meant that they would definitely not forget about this wedding and what they had witnessed my mother-in-law doing for a long time to come. We opened up the bar and served people the food while I waited for my husband to come back. Honestly, I did not even feel bad about making all the other guests feel awkward, because these were mostly pretentious, elitist, upper-class rich socialites who were only here to judge me since I did not belong to their glamorous world and was a self-made woman with a job. After that whole fiasco, my parents came up to me, and they seemed really annoyed with me. They had been on edge ever since I told them I was dating someone who was that rich, because obviously they had found all this wealth and luxury daunting and wanted me to try and blend in. But I had never followed their advice. This time, I had acted really badly in their opinion, and while they did agree that my mother-in-law was a psycho, they also felt that I could have waited to confront or humiliate her instead of airing our dirty linen in public. I got into a bit of an argument with them over it, but they refused to understand why I had done what I had done and ended up finishing up their lunch as fast as they could and leaving without even a goodbye, which was hurtful. 15 minutes after that, my husband came back and informed me that he had driven his mother back to the hotel and asked to have a word with me in person. Since I had been sitting with my friends while they told me that what I had done was gutsy but could also have adverse effects on my relationship, I was scared out of my wits while I followed my husband to a corner of the venue where nobody would disturb us or be able to hear us. I was fully convinced that he would break up with me then and there because of how I had made a fool out of him and his family. I even began to apologize for whatever I had done as soon as he stopped walking, but to my surprise, he told me that he was the one who needed to apologize. He said that on the drive back to the hotel, his mother said a lot of awful things about me that no woman should say about another woman, and that made him realize that his mother had just always hated me, but he'd failed to see the signs. He added that even though he did think that what I had done was extreme, it was probably because I had stayed silent for so long that I could not just hold back anymore. He did not know if what I had done was right or wrong, but he knew that he did not have an issue with it and said that he would be cutting his mother out of his life. Now, I was taken aback to hear that, since I was sure that he would dump me then. But yeah, that was that, and it was a solemn affair after that, since all the guests were rushing to leave to avoid any awkwardness. Things have been normal between me and my husband, but my parents are refusing to speak to me until I apologize to my mother-in-law. They believe that I should have handled it better. And yeah, I do think I could have, but I did not do so because of how angry I was. So, here is the million-dollar question. Am I the asshole for showing all the guests at my wedding how my mother-in-law had tried to ruin my dress? For those asking, yes, my mother-in-law no longer is in contact with me or my husband, at least not personally. But yeah, in a professional capacity, my husband still has to speak to her since she is a major stakeholder in the company. But she is not attending any dinners we host anytime soon. They had a huge fight a day after our wedding about how she had been treating me all these years, and my husband chose to cut her off, so that was that. The day after our wedding, she showed up at our house and was shocked that my husband had not packed up his stuff to leave yet, because she just assumed that after all that had happened the day before, my husband would leave me. She even refused to set foot in our home because of the filth inside it, namely me. But I was above such petty comments now, and chose to ignore her entirely while sitting on the couch with my headphones on. Of course, nothing was playing, but it helped to piss her off even more, laughing out loud when my husband told her that he had no intention of leaving, and he was going to stay with me no matter what happened. She totally lost it. My husband had not said anything in the car the day before, while driving her back to her hotel when she had been ranting about me, so she had assumed that he agreed with her. So this was quite the rude awakening for her. She began to scream at my husband and once again went on a tirade against me. She attacked my lowly profession as a flight attendant, and even said that I was not fit to marry into a family like theirs given my background. But my husband stood his ground and fought right back this time. Eventually, he just slammed the door in her face, and I think that must have been the last straw for her as well. She has not tried anything funny, and neither has she called or texted yet, so it has been suspiciously quiet on her end. But I think she has realized that at this point whatever she does will only make it all the worse for her. It has been 4 days since the whole wedding fiasco, and most of my husband's family has decided to cut ties with his mother, so that is nice. My friends and cousins are already making jokes about how iconic this was, but my parents are still not talking to me. They want me to apologize on a public platform for what I did, and well, that is not happening for sure. I am planning on visiting them next evening to clear the air in person, and I hope it goes well. Update 2. So, my husband and I just came back home from my visit to my parents, and I guess things are looking up now. They were not very receptive in the beginning, but then my husband stepped in and explained to them that he did not mind what I had done, and frankly, neither did anyone else. It was not my fault that his mother had pushed me to this extent that I felt obliged to expose her and humiliate her in public this way. I had been the bigger person long enough, and things had to change, which is why I did what I did. Coming from my husband, I guess my parents realized that this was not something that reflected badly on me, but instead just showed people how awful my mother-in-law was. By the time we left, things were a lot better, and I felt significantly lighter. We also heard from my husband's family lawyer that his mother had decided to cut him out of his will, and unless he filed for divorce, yeah, fat chance of that happening. I do not know why she thought that would even work when my husband has made it quite obvious that he could not give less of a damn about what she does. He is done, and so am I. So I wish she would just move on with her life and never bother us again. I'm hoping she does cut him out of her will. It is not like that will affect us in the slightest fiscally anyway. My husband let the lawyer know that she could do whatever she wanted to, as long as she did not bother him again. At last, we are done and dusted with her nonsense for sure this time. Update 3. Hey, I know it has been a few weeks since the last update, and this one is not about the drama, but more about probably the best week of my life, which I just had to share with everyone. But before I get to the good bit, yeah, my mother-in-law stayed true to her words and cut my husband out of her will, but it is all right and just means that there is less drama to deal with now. Anyway, yesterday, my husband threw me a full-blown party to make up for the disastrous wedding reception that we had. This time, there were only around 30 people, just our families and close friends, and I could not have been happier about it. Dinner, dancing, and drinks. That is all that last night was, and at the end of it, I received yet another surprise. My husband announced that he had been taking off with me on a month-long trip to Europe starting next week. Initially, we planned on going to the Bora Bora Islands for 1 week or so for a honeymoon because my husband had to come back to work as soon as he could. So this came as a huge surprise to me, but of course, I am thrilled, and I cannot wait to start our vacation. Sitting here on the balcony of our hotel in Santorini, watching the sun dip below the horizon and paint the Aegean Sea in shades of molten gold and rose, I finally feel the knot in my chest begin to loosen. The past few weeks have been a storm of emotion, rage, triumph, guilt, relief, love, and tonight, with the warm Mediterranean breeze on my skin and my husband's hand resting gently on mine, I can finally breathe enough to sort through it all. When I decided to play that video at the reception, I wasn't thinking about grace or forgiveness or keeping the peace. I was thinking about every single time I'd bitten my tongue, every barbed comment I'd swallowed, every moment I'd smiled through the humiliation just to protect the fragile happiness my fiancé and I had built for years. I told myself that silence was strength, that enduring her cruelty without retaliation made me the bigger person. I believed that if I just loved him hard enough, stayed kind enough, proved myself worthy enough, she would eventually see me, not as the gold-digging flight attendant 9 years his senior, but as the woman who made her son happier than she ever could. I was wrong. Silence didn't earn respect. It only gave her more room to sharpen her knives. The moment the footage started playing, the room went so still I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I watched her face crumple from smug satisfaction to raw panic, and something inside me cracked open, not with joy exactly, but with the sudden, violent release of pressure that had been building for years. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't elegant, it was messy and public and irreversible. And God help me. Part of me reveled in it after all the nights I'd cried alone in the bathroom, after all the times I'd questioned whether I really belonged in his world, after every whispered insult about my lowly profession and my inappropriate age. I finally got to say, without saying a single word, this is who you are. This is what you did. See it, feel it, live with it. But triumph is a fleeting high. The real aftermath came in waves. When my husband pulled me aside and apologized, not for what I'd done, but for how long he'd failed to protect me, I felt something shift. For the first time, I realized he had seen it too. Not just the dress, not just the video, but the years of subtle sabotage I'd endured in silence. His decision to cut her off wasn't a reaction to the humiliation of that day. It was the final piece of a puzzle he'd been too close to see clearly until now. Hearing him say he was done, that he chose us over her legacy, her money, her approval, it healed something I didn't even know was broken. My parents' reaction hurt more than I expected. They've always been cautious people, raised to keep family business behind closed doors, to smooth things over even when the rug is soaked in blood. They saw my public exposure as a loss of dignity, a reckless burn-the-bridges move that would haunt me forever. I tried to explain that the bridge had already been torched by her years ago, and that I was simply refusing to pretend the ashes weren't there anymore. They didn't understand, not at first. Walking away from their table without a goodbye felt like another small death. But when we went back to talk, when my husband stood beside me and spoke with quiet certainty about how long I'd carried the weight alone, something softened in them. They hugged me tightly, whispered apologies for not seeing how much pain I'd hidden, and promised to stand by us no matter what. That reconciliation, small as it seems, means the world. The quietest, deepest feeling has been the gratitude. For my friend who dropped everything to restore my dress, for the guests who didn't rush to defend her but instead came up to me afterward with hugs and quiet words of solidarity, for the cousins and friends who turned her sabotage into an inside joke that still makes me laugh through tears. And most of all, for my husband. He didn't defend her. He didn't ask me to apologize. He simply chose me again and again and again. Now, as we begin this month-long escape across Europe, I'm starting to understand that revenge isn't the opposite of forgiveness. Sometimes it's the necessary prelude to it. I don't forgive her. I may never forgive her. But I no longer need her apology to feel whole. I've spent so long measuring my worth by her rejection that I forgot I could define it myself. That video didn't just expose her, it freed me. It drew a line in the sand and said, this ends here. You no longer get to dictate the story of my life. I still feel flickers of guilt on quiet nights. Was it too cruel? Too public? Too final? Maybe. But then I remember the look on her face when she saw me walk down the aisle in the dress she thought she'd destroyed. Priceless, bewildered, defeated, and the guilt fades. She tried to erase me from my own wedding day. I refused to let her. That's not cruelty, that's survival. So here we are, newlyweds, a little bruised, a lot stronger, sipping wine as the stars come out over the caldera. My husband is already planning tomorrow's hike to Oya, talking about sunsets and quiet dinners and all the small, ordinary joys we get to build together without her shadow hanging over us. And for the first time in years, I believe him. I believe in us. I don't know what the future holds, whether she'll ever soften, whether the family rift will ever heal, whether the whispers will follow us forever. But I know this. I am loved, deeply and without reservation, by a man who sees every part of me and chooses me anyway. I have friends who fight for me when I can't fight for myself. I have a life that is mine, earned, imperfect, beautiful. And tonight, under this endless sky, I let the last of the anger slip away like sand through my fingers. Not because she deserves peace, but because I do. I deserve to wake up tomorrow without the weight of her hatred pressing on my chest. I deserve to love without apology, to celebrate without fear, to live without looking over my shoulder. I survived her. I outlasted her. And now finally I'm ready to leave her behind. Not in bitterness, but in the quiet certainty that my story is no longer hers to write.